Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kadeshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We welcome, as we do every day, Eugenia from Calgary, Boker Tov, snow-covered Calgary. All right. Warm hearts with Tanya, though. Elise, welcome from Georgia, if I remember correctly. Davida and Liba from New York. Boker Tov. Susan is with us in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Welcome. June is in Australia. Good night. Stephanie, welcome in Phoenix, Arizona. Tina is shalom to you in Canada. Gail, good morning, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining. Who else is with us? Rusty in Texas. Good morning. And to John, likewise, in North Carolina. Very good morning. Michael is in Germany. Good afternoon. Tim, also in Texas. Welcome. In London, we have Miriam. Okay. London, England, I would imagine. Beautiful. Thank you for joining. We have Izzy. Shalom, Izzy. Welcome. I think you're new. At least in greetings. Andrea, rather, in Phoenix. Welcome. Martin is in Michigan. Clem in Brisbane. It's very late. Robert, shalom to you in Boston. Paula is in Bakersfield, California, bright and early. Miriam in Hayden, Colorado. Welcome. Lori in North Carolina, if I remember correctly. Julie in Florida, welcome. Leah, also in Florida. Erica in Norway. Rena in Colorado, welcome. Philip, shalom. Who else? Diane in Arizona. TJ in Melbourne. Summer has definitely arrived in Australia. Not here. I guess that's why you're down under. All right, beautiful. Becky, welcome. Rivka from Florida, I think. No snow in Philly for Gail. Okay. Russ in Boca. There's no snow there either, I'm sure. Dot, good morning. Betty, shalom. Who else? Aryeh, Boker Tov, AJ. In Indonesia, welcome. All right, beautiful. We have in Clubhouse, we have Vilma, Batya, and David, Moshe, Amanda, Luz, Tim, Andrea, Celeste, Jenna, Eliana, Zacharie. Beautiful. Instagram, we have, it's hard to make out some of the handles. Chaim, welcome. And to Telebenta. Michael. Shmuel from Montreal. All right. Do salon. Okay. Eduardo. Better known as David. Welcome. Akoy. All right. Some fellow Montrealers. Beautiful. We continue in chapter 7. Chapter 7 in one word, klipos, the shell that covers over the holiness of God. And we spoke yesterday about the intermediate form of klipa, klipas noiga, as it's called. Noiga means that it's translucent, that there's a ray of light, of goodness. In the spiritual world of Bria, it's very apparent. And this physical world is very non-apparent. So much so, as we explained yesterday, that the wicked have prevail, because this world is a world where the concealment of God is the natural state of being. And therefore, when it comes to a material world around us, food and things, we need to have intent to use it for a higher purpose. So yes, you can have beef and you can have fine wine and all of that, as Rava used it in order to broaden his mind so that when he would learn, he would be able to absorb so much better. That's the purpose that he used it. And likewise, being humorous. I can't think of a joke, so sorry. Maybe I'll come up with one later. Being humorous, right, can be just, to look good, and people think, like to connect to humorous people, as long as the humor is not about them, of course. Or it could be humor that you elevate, that you tell something humorous in order to channel the energy of a group of people that you're about to teach. And by bringing them through a humorous remark, you're able to elevate them, that they can now be more receptive to the teachings, by way of example. That's what we spoke about yesterday. That is the middle ground of Klipas Noiga. However, there's obviously the other side, and that's today the Alter Rebbe brings out. What's the other side of the coin? Is that a person can, of course, take that same food and eat it in a gluttonous manner, just to satisfy one's lust, one's bodily desires, as is the desire of the animal soul, just to have its desires fulfilled. Which is the element of water, that water gives rise and grow, makes things grow, make things luscious, that we're tempted by the lusciousness of it rather than the exaltedness that we can bring through it, through the food, right? So if it's merely to bring pleasure to one's appetite, then what have you done to that which is klipas noiga? You've actually now brought that vitality from an intermediate sort of, a no man's land in a sense, and you've actually reduced it to vitality that is now sholish klipas atzmius, that is completely unholy, even though the very food that you ate was kosher food. But being that it was used merely as a vehicle for pleasure, so now the vitality that you're getting is not from klipas nega, but for sholish klipas atmeis. But even more so, the Alter Rebbe says, the body actually then becomes a vehicle for these klipas. In other words, what happens is you lose control. You've lost control. We become subservient, just like a chariot is subservient to its rider. So also here we're, when we eat in such a manner, in a gluttonous manner, just for for pleasure's sake, then we become a vehicle to, and we lose our will. We become subservient. We become now subservient to klipa. But the body remains only in a temporary state. Until a person does tshuva, until a person repents, meaning that a person does penitence and returns to serving God. Then it ceases to be a vehicle for klipa, that food that you ate, by way of example. And the energy in the food and drink then is released from klipa, from negativity, and returns to sanctity. Why? Because the meat or the wine or whatever it is that you had was kosher. So there was nothing wrong with the the food itself per se. It was just about the intent of the individual, that the person was just seeking self-pleasure, only pleasure, and therefore degraded themselves, degraded the food and the energy of that food, that it could now be brought into a negative force. And this is what is termed in the Hebrew word mutar. Mutar means permissible. Permissible, we translate it permissible, but mutar means unbound. In other words, that this food is permissible, meaning it's unbound, that it could ascend into sanctity, and that your vitality is coming directly from God's holiness. Being that it's released, it's unbound, not tied to extraneous forces, which would be something that is usur, not permitted, that is forbidden, meaning it's forbidden from being able to rise up to a place of holiness. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, even if a person did tshuva, right? In other words, you ate gluttonous and then you feel, oh, that was wrong. You actually feel it in the body, right? Like you feel how you are a vehicle for negativity, because you actually feel lousy, right? In such an instance. So one does tshuva, yet there is a trace of negativity that's still in the body, right? In other words, tshuva, penitence, not only elevates the person, but elevates the food and the drink that was permissible, right? That was not bound to extraneous forces, that could be elevated. However, it's only elevated from this point onwards, but not backwards. What does that mean? It means, therefore, that there is a vestige of negativity on the soul. There's a vestige of negativity on the soul, and that's the reason why the soul, the body, will have to undergo what we call purgatory. Do we believe in purgatory? Well, yeah, it's called chibut hakever, which means the purging that goes on after our time in this world. Purgatory comes from the purging. What are you purging? Well, the klipa that was, connected to your soul. Even though a person did tshuva, but tshuva in this instance, we'll learn more different levels of tshuva, but in this instance, tshuva, penitence, means from here on in, you're changing, and therefore the life force of that permissible food can now be elevated to sanctity. But for the time that it was initially, gluttonously eaten, then at that moment, no. There's a stain on the soul. There's klipa. What's a stain? It's the klipa that the soul has been engaged in. So this is the idea of purging. We'll explain a little more about this when we take this apart, right? As a result, the Alter Rebbe says, likewise, when it comes to permissible relations between husband and wife, that it could be intimacy, can be purely for the lust that a person has, and therefore that relationship that could be elevated into sanctity is degraded into 3 unholy klipas, again, until the person does tshuva. In other words, being that the relations between husband and wife in a time that they can have relations, on a time of nida, for example, is a permissible thing, right? It's not bound to any extraneous negative forces, but there is in the engagement of intimacy, there needs to be an intent that is not basically only seeking your pleasure. That doesn't mean that there isn't pleasure that one has, right? But you're not, that's not what you're seeking. We'll unpack this more also. Right? So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. However, that's only when it comes to permissible relations. How about forbidden relations? God forbid. Then then completely forbidden, a forbidden relationship is completely shalish klipas atmeas, is completely the three entirely unclean klipas. This is something that's tied to extraneous forces, meaning bound. When something is forbidden or prohibited in Hebrew, asur, it means it's bound to extraneous forces and it cannot be lifted up. And then that will only then become elevated when Mashiach comes. Well, it'll actually become like in two stages. One is through death, brings atonement, and ultimately Mashiach will bring that because when Mashiach comes, all negative klipa forces will be eradicated from the world as the spirit of impurity is removed from earth. Is there a way that you can deal with it today? Yes, but it's not so simple. You have to do tshuva, but not like tshuva before. Tshuva before, when it was something permissible, so now you just have to kind of, change your focus, change your intent. Here, though, the tshuva has to come in a way that is out of a deep love, a thirst, a feeling that you were in the desert, dry, removed from God, to such a way that that love now brings you that the sin actually becomes a merit. How does the sin become a merit? Because feeling so far removed because of the sin, because remember we're talking about sin here of forbidden relations, that's the example that he's giving over here, that you feel, very, very distant, and because of that distance, that creates an urge, a thirst of being in a barren desert, of wanting to come closer to God, and then that great thirst prompts a person out of a great love to want to be attached to become even closer, to such a degree, as our sages say in the Talmud, that where a Baal Tshuva stands, a penitent stands, even the perfectly righteous cannot stand, because the perfectly righteous are serving not in a barren desert. They're not in a barren desert. They're, they're not distant from God. They're close. But because of the closeness, they're not prompted in the same energized love when you feel the distance as the penitent, the Baal Tshuva, is. But if it doesn't come through this kind of tshuva, which is a very lofty form of tshuva, then you don't transform the negative force to be a virtuous force now, then that klipa still remains a trace on the neshama, on the soul, on the body, and through death, there brings atonement then, and as we mentioned previously, the idea of purging it. Whew. All right, let's take this apart. Ooh, a lot here. A lot that we shared. So the first point is, again, that most of this world is, the vitality is klipas noiga, admixture of good and evil. And that means that we have a possibility to rise, to bring it to sanctity, or to degrade it. That's all dependent on our intent. The beautiful thing in that is, since it is something that is permissible, that means that even if we do something, what it means is in that moment, like When whoa, our eyes grow big because, it's something that we really liked and a pleasure from, and we're only seeking the pleasure thereof. We're not, we lost ourselves in the moment. I've done it. We've all done it, right? That we lose ourselves in the moment in, wow, this is, this is delicious looking, this is really appetizing, and like we're taken. So in that moment, it's controlling us, and we feel afterwards how we've lost control, and hopefully that makes us, want to do tshuva. And the beautiful thing in it is it's a temporary thing. It means that in that moment that you're eating that way, right? But afterwards, if you're going to learn Tanya, or you're going to go pray or whatever, now maybe because you've been in control by klipa, so it makes it a little more difficult to learn. It makes it a little more difficult to pray, or it makes it a little difficult to care for another person because you were just so so self-engaged, right? In your desire, your lust. Then it makes it harder to care for another, think for another, no doubt. But it's possible because that was only in the moment. It's a temporary vitality that's coming from a negative place. But the next moment that I'm learning, or the next moment I'm giving tzedakah, and especially if I've done tshuva, if I, regret eating that way, and that I know I should have, thought about God a bit, we can return that vitality and upgrade it back to a sanctity because it was permissible kind of engagement. That's amazing, right? Yet that being said, there's still going to be some kind of stain left on the neshama because we're probably not going to do tshuva from love. Not when it's permissible, I mean, what do you mean? That steak was permissible. That sushi was permissible. That lemon meringue pie was permissible. It was all kosher, right? So it's going to be a difficult challenge to kind of, feel the distance, but we'll feel we'll feel some kind of negativity because we're sensitive to it because we've learned Tanya now. So we're different people. Not that we won't fail. We're going to fail in this. Let's be quite frank and honest. I fail in it less now than I've done in the past because I learn more Tanya and I apply it in my life more. So, but listen, we all have we all have those moments, but it's temporary. The effect is not necessarily temporary because, as we said, it needs to be purged. Our soul needs to be cleansed from it. And the concept of purging over here is not, God forbid, purgatory, you're going to burn in hell. No. What it means is the stain needs to be cleansed. Just like a child who plays in a rainy day in the mud, mother, father have to, scrub between the nails and the hair, and we're full of mud. And parent does it lovingly to cleanse the child, and that's what God does with us. He does it lovingly. So purgatory, yes, meaning to purge, to cleanse us, absolutely. Now, through our tshuva, we can do a lot of that purging ourselves, which is amazing. But there's going to probably be some stuff left. The righteous don't. The righteous don't have anything left, but you and I will. But that's okay. If it's all about me, and all about me, getting a good place in heaven, so boy, are you going to be like frightened, and you're going to be like, But if it's not about me, it's about my service. Okay, so I failed in the service here. I picked myself up, and I'm advancing. Now, that's all again in the permissible stuff. When it comes to things that are prohibited, prohibited means Asur means it's bound. It's bound to extraneous forces. It's tied. So it can't be upgraded. It can't be upgraded. Unless, well, until a person passes, until Mashiach comes ultimately, then it can have its upgrade. Because then all of, the impurities will be removed from the world. Unless we do a real tshuva from love, from feeling the distance, and that distance is what causes us to gallop forward in a more powerful way than we would have galloped if we wouldn't have done the sin. But of course, you can't do the sin in order to get there because that's not going to work. But this is a powerful idea that you can actually have the demerit become a merit. That negativity be transformed into something because it brought you so much closer. And the truth is, many of us who are joining here are Bali Tshuva, meaning you weren't raised with Torah and mitzvahs, and you felt that you were in a barren desert, and because of the distance, that's what brings you closer and wanting to become closer and closer to Hashem, closer to Yiddishkeit, closer to Torah and mitzvahs, closer to the truth, closer to life itself, God being the source of life. This is very powerful, that every single one of us here probably, or for the most part, are such an individual. And that's an amazing thing. Think about it for a moment. We come from a place of, not raised with this, where this is not what is normal life that we are accustomed to. But then we wake up one day and we realize, wow, I'm just so distant from truth. I'm so distant from real life. And the barren desert that you feel, it creates such a thirst. You want truth. You want real life. And that prompts you to seek out Hashem. Seek out Torah mitzvahs. To learn Tanya, as we're doing here together. And to grow together. And I think that's who we are. It's this point over here. We shouldn't lose it. Because once we do tshuva, then, we're on the path. Shouldn't lose it. All right. Questions, comments? Let me get onto the feed over here before I lose it. Some questions on Facebook. All right. Yeah, once again, kavanah comes to the fore, intent. Stephanie, how do we degrade that which cannot be with around Hashem? How do we degrade? Again, for a Jew to eat kosher, so you got kosher food, but you eat it for mere pleasure. Right? So that's a body thing. That's not a soul thing. The soul thing would be you're eating it to give you strength so you can serve Hashem. At least the mindfulness of it. That doesn't mean that you don't have any pleasure in it, but what your mindfulness is, that I'm eating this to give me strength to serve Hashem. I ate breakfast before the class. I needed some strength. And, I can't say there was no pleasure in eating it, but definitely I was mindful that I need the strength here. So I can, teach better and I can serve Hashem better. So there's definitely that, mindfulness. Gail and Alice, I'm sorry, I lost the feed. Please reshare your question. I got Stephanie's, but I lost the feed. I'm sorry. Please reshare it. I gotta say that, and I've said this before, how every day the Alter Rebbe is introducing a new idea in teachings that are chiddush, are novelty, that are just amazing. Beautiful. Davida, if you can put up the questions. Okay, Laurie, experience the loss of a spouse. What is an acceptable reason to remarry if you no longer can have children? Because when God said it's not good that man be alone, right? He didn't say in order just to have children. The idea of being alone is not a good thing. So for women, likewise, even more so. So it's being married is not about having a family. Proof is our dear Rebbe was married and didn't have children, didn't have a family. I mean, physical children. He had children, you and I, and all of his Chassidim. But yeah, it is. I mean, it is appropriate to remarry as a general rule. For any specifics, that we have to take out in Tanya therapy. Okay. Okay, you have a question. Liba has a question in Instagram. Okay. Let me find it here. Okay. If, God forbid, one commits a forbidden sin, but through tshuva, it then becomes a mitzvah, is one still accountable for committing the sin in the first place? Well, not if it's real tshuva from Ava, out of this love. Then it becomes, as the sages say, a merit. That's why the Baal Tshuva stands in a place where the complete righteous can't, which is really amazing, quite amazing. So, but again, let's be very frank and honest. The righteous are not going to have a stain on their soul. You and I, all of us, we will. Don't look at that, because then it's all about, being self-serving. Focus on serving Hashem, doing the best you can. That there's a stain on the soul. Maybe there's things I didn't do tshuva for. I didn't do tshuva properly. That's okay. That's okay. Don't get caught up in that, because that's going to make you crazy. And again, what's prompting it is self-directedness. Concentrate on what Hashem needs from us, what Hashem wants from me, and that I get my vitality from Kedusha, and that the things that I engage in, I try to uplift as best as I can. Am I going to have my failings? We're going to have it, folks. It's okay. It's okay, really. It's okay. We will, move forward from there. We're going to talk more about that later when the Alter Rebbe goes into great depth into this concept. That'll come a bit later. Before we go to Clubhouse, I just want to, before I lose a feed over here again. Then how does the loose bone? Yeah, the loose bone is that bone that doesn't deteriorate and is there for Tchias HaMesim. Anna, if marriage is not just about Pru Revu, be fruitful and multiply, but because not good to be alone, then why is not by Tanya or Torah or Judaism to marry same gender? First of all, God says it's an abomination to marry the same gender or to be with the same gender. That's first of all. And secondly, is as we've learned in Tanya, everything about creation is about a union between the male and the female. In the heavenly spheres, every time we do a mitzvah, we create a union between male and female that brings new life. So everything is about that union, and therefore the union is not a union between male and female does beget spiritual creations. So therefore, everything is about two opposites coming together. That's really, think about it. That's what this world is. This world is klipa, as we've said, right? This world is full of klipa. And what are we trying to do? To sanctify it, to rise above it. Complete opposite of what it is, and we're trying to rise above. So God says two people coming together of the same gender, well, not rising above anything. Hey, that's great, good friends, for sure. But the whole point is the opposite natures that have to come and fuse together and to create a oneness. That's in everything in creation is that way. Well, a lot more on that, but suffice it for now. Gail, is Hashem's light being revealed more at this time? And if so, is Klipa receding? Oh, really good question, Gail. So I'd have to answer yes and no. A good Jewish answer. Yes and no. On the one hand, the klipa is getting darker. Things are darker on one level. But if we dig a little deeper, we're going to actually see we're getting closer to final redemption, and therefore klipa is receding. And Hashem's light is more revealing. And what's the perfect proof of Hashem's light is more revealing? Tanya. Before there was Tanya 200 years ago, people didn't have these teachings for the masses, at least, the righteous, the mystics, they had it. But for you and I, the simple folk, didn't have this. So we didn't have this magnificent light that we can introduce into our lives that can overcome a greater darkness out there. And furthermore, this magnificent light is actually a taste of the ultimate light of Mashiach. So in that respect, klipa is receding. So it's like a dual kind of thing. Both things have a truth. Very good question. Thank you, Gail. Gail, I did. What should we say to ourselves before we eat besides a bracha to make it more meaningful? Does a benching assist in the effort after, for sure. So before you make a blessing, if we have like a 3-second pause or a second pause even, and before we start eating, we just think that this food is something that can be elevated. Kosher food, of course. That it can, before you make even the blessing, even it can be a split second, by the way. Just think that this food is given to you so you could gain energy from it, so that you could do good and change the world for good. And that's the purpose of it. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy it afterwards, or we're going to enjoy it. That's not, but we were mindful that that's not what it's about. We were mindful about that. That is that, and by the way, that is so private. You have to, make yourself a holy roller and just sit like this and, have intent. Just in your mind. You have, you bring it in front of you. Just a brief moment you're thinking to yourself. No one even has to notice. You don't have to make yourself look Holy. Look regular. Be holy. Look like a regular individual, but be holy. Wow, amazing stuff. Okay, excuse me, while I don't want to lose the feed again. I hope I've answered some of the questions well. But good himself is dually feminine and Shechina. I'm not duality. I'm not clear, Anna, what you're. But God himself is duality. God is oneness. Does the soul go to purgatory before or after? Oops. What I just lost. I'm sorry. Does the soul go to purgatory before or after going before the heavenly court? First goes to heavenly court. Asked a bunch of questions. Okay, Anna. Okay. Luz.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hello, how are you?
We're doing good. We look at thank God around here. We didn't suffer anything from the tornadoes, thank God.
Ooh, where are you?
Tennessee.
Tennessee. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yes.
we
I was listening to some of the news, and my heart goes out, and our prayers go out to all those that need to be saved, need to be found, and to be tough times.
Yeah, we're in the Northwest, so it was kind of close to us, but hey, we're good. I'm very thankful for that. My question is about Shabbat.
Yes.
We prepare a meal. Shabbat is about pleasure. Shabbat is a gift. We prepare a meal, great food. We want to make it really good. We want everybody to want to eat and enjoy the food. Are we contributing to the greed?
Very good. So we mentioned it yesterday, actually. In yesterday's class, we mentioned that because there's a mitzvah to enjoy Shabbos and to enjoy it in a physical way with physical good foods, so it's a mitzvah to have the best foods and to have the pleasure thereof, and being mindful of that it's a pleasure of the mitzvah of Shabbos. So then, in that respect, no, it's we can eat more than we would normally eat on a weekday. We don't have to have the same mindfulness that we would during the week because there's the mitzvah of the pleasure of enjoying Shabbos and enjoying it again in a physical, of course, in the spiritual also, with prayers and with the learning and fabringen and all of the and all of those things. Absolutely, yeah. So no, you're not degrading yourself. Now, of course, just to make Shabbos only about the physical pleasure and not to have any of the spiritual pleasure of Shabbos, and of course is lacking in the pleasure, in having the full sense of the pleasure. A good question, thank you.
Good, we're safe. I make sure I explain to them about Shabbat and family and giving thanks and being thankful for our blessings and all that. So that's what we're
and just to celebrate Shabbos with pleasure, with pleasure. In other words, that that Shabbos should be celebrated with pleasure. So yeah, they should have that notion. Absolutely.
Good. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Davida, if someone is suffering from an incurable disease in this world, is that in order to cleanse them? Well, definitely it's a cleansing, no question. More than that, I can't say why God would do that. Rick, does the Talmud tell us what the heavenly court is like? Yes, first thing going to ask us if we did business with trust in God. Did we wait for Mashiach? Did we set aside times to learn Torah every day to learn Torah? Some of the questions. Was Adam's clothes klipa? In a sense, yes. Did sons of Korach stay in purgatory after the rebellion until they did full tshuva? Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. All right. You guys are amazing. Kol hakavod to everybody. Anybody else to share or to ask anything? All right. A couple of things. 1 o'clock is, of course, Rambam is every day. I just want to make mention that we here in this Chabad house over here, we're doing in next Sunday and Monday. Send you information about it, but whoever wants to participate beforehand and to know more, we're doing a charity campaign, a crowdfunding campaign where we have matchers to help. We have a one time a year annual campaign, and some just letting you know, next Sunday for 36 hours until Monday night, God willing. We'll keep you posted more about it. But you can always go to charity spelled with a D.com /CZK. Chabad Zichron Kedoshim, CZK. To find out more, if you want to volunteer or to be part of a team, create a team, you can always let me know. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. But that's in 6 days' time that will begin. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichron Kedoshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.